What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of In the Middle with Dominique. It's me, Dominique. And some of you may be familiar with In the Middle, not In the Middle, but what is it? I don't know. I forgot the other name of the other thing. So we're not going to mention that. But yeah, this is In the Middle with Dominique, where this is the podcast where nuance resides or nuance exists. And today, from the title, you could tell that we're going to be talking about forgiveness, me forgiveness in particular. And I think it's interesting and a little ironic that I'm recording this today. It's July 4th, Monday, July 4th. And as you know, July 4th is Independence Day when, the people from Britain or whatever won the Revolutionary War and got its independence from England, where America was established as America and this and that. And so some people who don't mess with, especially people of color, don't necessarily mess with the 4th of July per se, because those rules and the Constitution that was made didn't really consider us. So the idea of 4th of July is not really one that we really celebrate per se, which is why it was important for Juneteenth to be a national holiday, because among slavery that was in the midst of the Constitution at the time, in the midst of getting emancipated, everybody didn't know. There wasn't, mass media, newspapers, things of that nature to share of the news that slavery was over. So that's that on Juneteenth and the 4th of July. But today we're going to be talking about forgiveness. Me personally, these last couple of years has been really trying. I know, right? It could have been trying for you as well. We're in the second year post 2020 and 2019 where the pandemic started, as far as like COVID-19 and stuff like that. And I just feel like my dad had passed away in 2017. And I feel like ever since then, I've been on my own quest of independence and adulthood in a different way. Him passing away put me in a situation that I've never had to take care of myself in that particular way before. And so now we're past that, as far as like his passing. 3 years later, COVID comes and a whole bunch of stuff is happening. Now, my dad and I, we didn't really have like the best relationship. We wasn't the closest. And I wouldn't say that he was the best father in the world. But in his passing, it was a big thing for me to, one, find my voice, to be able to articulate my anger. In a lot of grieving, there was a lot of anger. I was grieving a lot of things at the time also, as far as like his passing. Later on, there was some other relationships that were terminated. And regardless if you left on a good path or if the relationship was like you separated amicably, it still takes a part of you where you need to grieve that relationship or readjust your life because that relationship no longer exists. And in the midst of me like defending myself or finding myself in situations where I might have been angry and right, I was still performing wrong. And so a lot of times it was hard for people to hear what I was saying because it wasn't delivered in the right way where people wanted to hear it. And I did have a lot of anger. And so this year in particular, though, well, in the not even this year, it's like for so many times I've been in arguments with people and I was right, but they couldn't receive it at the time, or the proof wasn't in the pudding, or they couldn't see the proof in the pudding at the time. And so I became more attracted to vindication as opposed to maybe compassion or forgiveness, I guess, per se. Like I wasn't really in a space to forgive per se because I knew I was right. I knew I was right, and you try to make me wrong while I was right. And that I can't get over. Now you have to sit on what I said that was right in the first place and reflect on why you was mad at me for the fact that I was right in the first place. So it was hard for me to get over situations because I felt like there was a double infraction. Meanwhile, I'm not taking into consideration how I contributed to the issue. And that brings me to Brandi of like Basketball Wives. Brandi in Malaysia and Basketball Wives, they have this unique relationship where they had a relationship a long time ago. And their friendship broke because Brandi's dad passed away, according to Brandi. And Malaysia didn't reach out in the midst of her grieving the death of her father. At the time, though, Malaysia was going through her own particular things with her kids and working and figuring out the co-parenting situation with her ex-husband. And Malaysia says that their relationship was terminated way before that, when Brandi was upset at Malaysia when she couldn't stay on the show, or when she got kicked off the show. It was as if Malaysia didn't do what she was supposed to do to keep Brandi on the show. However, Brandi was doing her own thing, saying her own thing, having her own arguments that contributed to her being terminated from the show. And so now that they're back on the show, Shawnee's gone, which was probably the middle person, but she's taking a step back in, doing the show, or whatever, or at least being a cast member on the show. And the main problem now is between Brandi and Malaysia. In the midst of you hearing them going back and forth about the breakdown in their relationship, you can hear that Brandi is the victim in this conversation. And I'm not saying that she is 100% the victim, but she is taking the place of victim in this situation. And Malaysia is trying to take accountability for her own part of it, like understanding, like, look, I really did not know. And I'm sorry that this happened to you. I'm sorry that you went through it alone, or whatever the case was. But we were not friends then. We were not friends. And it wasn't like you expecting me to jump back into your life because your dad passed away or whatever the case. Like, I can't go back and say what I would have done differently if I would have been there for you, if I wouldn't have been there for you. But the fact of the matter is, I genuinely didn't know that this whole thing happened. And so every time you see them after that, they have this conversation when they're in the white, up on the roof or whatever, or the patio, whatever the case. You see that they get into these arguments all the time, and Brandi is just in a space of making Malaysia wrong. I've had relationships with people where they've done me wrong, and I still had to keep them in my life, whether it was for people in my family. I had a whole argument with my sister last year where I was not speaking to her, and I was right in feeling the way that I felt. I was right in not talking to her and all of that. But it was legitimately eating away at me, the fact that I was upset with her. It was eating away at me, the fact that, she was going to be present at family functions. Like, I'm not going to ask her to not show up to family functions, or that she didn't deserve to be at family functions because I was there, or vice versa. When I did have a conversation with her later on, it didn't seem as if she was able to grasp everything that actually hurt me, all of the infractions that she caused to hurt me. But I also didn't want to stay in the space of being the victim. She is my older sister, and I felt like it was important for me to forgive her, regardless if I don't know if this infraction is ever going to happen again. We have a sister in between us where it was her birthday and I walked right past her, said hello, and kept it pushing, and had no intentions of speaking to her for the rest of the night. and even got a kick out of it when, you know, I sidebarred her or whatever the case. It was cool in the moment, but after a while, I didn't want to continue that behavior. I didn't want to be in that particular space with my own sister. And so, again, even though I was right for feeling the way that I felt, everybody has a space, you know, there's a spectrum of emotions, and embarrassment may be one, not necessarily one that I was feeling at the time, but to have a conversation with someone and to have them lay out all of the ways that you particularly behaved, it could have been embarrassing for her to hear those things like, this is not me, this isn't that. And, you know, to see her behave in different situations that didn't have anything to do with me, it made me even more realize that I need to forgive her because this is bigger than me. Or you could be in a situation where, you know, it may be easy to cut somebody off. Like it's easy to cut somebody off, but you do, like, let's just say your arm, for instance. You and your arm, like I'm like, for me personally, I'm right-handed. If I ended up chopping my right hand off, even though I'm left-handed, I'm still going to miss having my right hand. I have to grieve the life that I had with two hands because I don't have that anymore. And I think the ability to be able to forgive really lightens up the load, your emotional, mental load. And I was reading my birth chart yesterday, and I don't remember exactly what was the placement, but as a Virgo, one, you know, Virgos are very particular about striving for perfection. And I know, like I try to stay away in my mind. I'm not perfect. You know, this doesn't have to be perfect. But that inability to reach perfection sometimes leaves me debilitated. Like I know it's not going to be perfect, so why am I even putting the effort in? Or I know that it's not going to be perfect, so why do I have to go so hard? Like if I'm not going to get 100% out of it, why do I have to put in 100%? And that's the logical, that's a logic, that's me thinking that way, but it doesn't help me emotionally to feel that way, like to think that, and that thought doesn't make me feel good. But that still doesn't stop me from making an excuse to not give 100%. And so when I don't give 100%, I've I've made it okay, like I've excused it, but I haven't necessarily forgiven myself because I'm now mad at myself because I didn't give 100%. So it's this vicious cycle of mental anguish that really has nothing to do with anyone else, that has 100% to do with me. And sometimes that anger or frustration that I may have with myself, I may also project that onto others. And so when others are not giving 100% of themselves to a particular subject or matter or whatever the case, I can identify that and still have feelings about it, even though I too fall short. And maybe I'm judging them for falling short because I intentionally, at a particular point, don't show up 100%. And so, like, there's this, it's like a lot, like everything that I just said, as far as like forgiving others, but also, you know, being able to forgive yourself. It's, it's a, it's something that you have to provide yourself. And I think having a spiritual relationship with a higher being, because at some point we don't necessarily feel responsible to behave properly for our parents, you know, but if having a higher guardian where you could be vulnerable to, be honest with, um, and hold yourself accountable to the either negative thoughts, negative behaviors, negative exchanges. It really helps to reestablish balance when you're necessarily heavy on one side, um, where you could practice forgiveness for yourself, to yourself, and therefore practice forgiveness in other people, even when you're right. You know, I was stuck on being validated or vindicated or redeemed. You know, I just felt like when the information was presented, I was redeemed from that situation. And that's not necessarily true, because you still have to take accountability for the way that you showed up in that situation as well, and not just that thing that someone did to you, you know? So that might have been a whole lot. You may have to sit and watch back on it. And shout out to Brandi in Malaysia. I'm not sure where their relationship is right now. But as individual women, it's important that you are able to communicate, hear, and receive what the other person is saying. And just because it's not, even just because the person is not saying something that you took into consideration, doesn't mean that is wrong, and that you can, and that you're still allowed to persist with the story that allowed you to be mad at them in the first place. Provide space for new information to come in, regardless but be discerning if, you know, if it lines up or if it doesn't line up. You know what I'm saying? And just because you forgive somebody doesn't mean that you need to allow them back into your life. Being able to forgive allows space for joy and freedom and fresh breath to reside, where it's not tight and closed and fired up, you know, reserved for somebody else who doesn't necessarily deserves it. Nobody deserve it. So that's my thought for today. Thank you so much for listening. And I look forward to either seeing you or sharing with you another time. Bye.